Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Future of Law is Today, the podcast bringing you straight talk on law, legal tech, and where the profession is going. I'm your host, Ceschino, and we're cutting through the hype to talk about what's changing in this field and what still needs to. Today's guest is Lynette Ooi, founder and CEO of BetterWiser, a boutique consulting firm working at the intersection of law, leadership, and transformation. Before BetterWiser, Lynette spent 18 years as a tech lawyer and global legal executive, including leadership roles at Amazon, AWS, and PayPal. She's built and led high-performing cross-border legal teams supporting billion-dollar businesses across more than 100 markets in Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. Lynette is also an executive coach, helping founders and leaders navigate change with intention. She reaches an audience of over 10,000 professionals on LinkedIn with insights on professional reinvention, legal operations, and the future of work. Hi, Lynette. Very happy to have you with me today. We have some great stuff about the state of legal tech and what's going well with it and what's maybe not going so well with it and how people can make sense of the chaos and get started on their own legal tech journeys. But first, please tell us a bit about yourself, because you have a lot of great experience in the legal world, the legal tech world, which of course is why I invited you on the podcast. So please tell us a bit about your story.
Thank you so much, Ceschino. First of all, just want to say it's really a privilege to be here and to be the first guest on your podcast. I've been watching your own work and think there's a lot in common between us. So just a little bit about me. I'm the founder and CEO of BetterWiser. BetterWiser is a firm that works on legal AI transformations with law firms and legal departments. So I like to joke that we only do the hardest part of legal tech transformations, which is not the tech, but is the change management and the project management around it. How do you get people to buy in? How do you actually get the most out of the tech and customize training for the tool, for the particular client type, for the particular practice areas? And that really takes knowledge of the law from my background as a lawyer and a general counsel in big tech companies like Amazon and PayPal. But it also takes an understanding of people, which comes from my executive coaching training and background. So it's interesting space to be in and excited to dive into the topic today.
Yeah, fantastic. So you raise a great point about change management, that the challenges with legal tech are not just limited to the tech itself and creating it. Sometimes it's about figuring out how to use it and really get value out of it in your own day-to-day work. So could you walk us through what some of the challenges are in legal tech adoption today?
Yeah, sure. And I don't want to underestimate the difficulty that vendors face in developing tech. I'm sure it's a very complex area. But I think from the buyer side that are looking at solutions, one big challenge is that the narrative is around legal tech is currently being led by tech vendors, and the conversation can be quite tech backwards. And what I mean is that, when they get pitched, when these buyers get pitched in the demo, the vendors tend to be quite focused on what their AI solution can do, but many, don't have a deep understanding of the customer's pain points. So right out of the gate, there is a bit of a mistrust. There's a bit of a lack of trust. But even aside from that, some vendors are really good at building trust. But even then, buyers also are just a bit overwhelmed by choice. They're overwhelmed by how quickly the tech is changing. One model today, another model comes up tomorrow, and then it gets incorporated into another UX in a solution. So there's that fear that things are changing too quickly to keep up. I think buyers are also afraid that they might not get a return on their investments because that's still unclear, the ROI side. And finally, they might also fear the people side, whether they can actually convince their employees to use the tech and be enthusiastic about it. So there's this sort of trust gap a little bit between the vendor side and the buyer side. But I also see there could potentially be mistrust between management and employees, an internal trust issue, because management often makes decisions about AI, but they are not the power users of the tech. So they roll out a tool, they roll out a policy, and the expectation is that their team is able to use it and use it meaningfully, so that there can be a bit of a disconnect. So one law firm associate I spoke to said, I think the bosses are overestimating how much my job can be done by AI or how much AI can actually help my work. And that lack of understanding can create misalignment. And at worst, it can breed resentment.
That's a great point, that when it comes to change management, if you're not bringing people along with you in the decision making, you can't necessarily expect them to just fall in line when it comes to actually adopting the solution that you've chosen, right? You've raised several great points, but can we jump a little more into the trust issue? So there's a lack of trust between buyers and vendors on one hand, but also the lack of trust between potentially employees and managers. Let's take a look at each of those in turn in a little more depth. So first, buyers and vendors. Where does that lack of trust come from?
Like I said, I think the lack of trust really comes from, in some cases, not fully understanding the customer's pain points. This happens in many industries, but in legal especially. Law is a very specific profession. It's a profession where we pride ourselves on accuracy, precision. We pride ourselves on getting things right, being comprehensive. So, quality is a very, very important thing for us. We cannot have half baked outcomes or poor quality deliverables. So that's a very deep cultural question. So the demands of a vendor are not just fancy tech or functionality. The demand is really on output. So I would love to see vendors focus a bit more on the quality and the reliability aspects, which are the boring aspects of legal tech adoption, but are so essential when selling to lawyers.
Yeah, that's a great point. The way I think of it is, because I've worked with several venture-backed tech companies, and the ethos, there's this whole move fast and break things ethos. It feels kind of like throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. And to your point, that's completely antithetical to how lawyers think and work, because you have to be meticulous, you have to be careful, you have to be thorough. So yeah, you have this culture clash, and actually you posted about this recently. You have this culture clash between tech companies, which are trying to move fast and break things until they figure out what works, and the lawyers who are, their whole job is mitigating risk, identifying and mitigating it.
Exactly, and it's similar to how when I was a general counsel, an in-house lawyer, you get that same tension, a healthy tension in a way between sales folks who are focused on making a sale, the compliance folks who are focused on operationalizing solutions, and the legal team that is really there to identify risks and mitigate them in an effective and practical way. So everything has to work well in symphony, and there has to be a sense of collaboration rather than the various stakeholders at odds with each other.
Yeah, fantastic point. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the other side of the trust coin, so to speak. You mentioned trust between employees and management. So this could be in-house, it could be in a firm. Could you talk a little more about where does that trust gap arise when management is making decisions about which tech to adopt, not necessarily getting employee feedback, and then how do we overcome that?
Yeah, I think a big challenge, and it's not easy for managers because things are moving so quickly. So there's a sense of FOMO where CEOs, general counsel feel that they need to just choose something and move forward. And that speed is necessary to some extent, but also communication and consultation are also very important. So how does a manager reconcile that? They have to really make decisions, but do their best to bring people along in that journey. And that means making people feel that their views matter, that the solution is chosen with their needs in mind, that their concerns are being heard and addressed, and also explaining where there are limitations. Like if management is quite transparent and says, I don't have all the answers, I can't tell you hand on heart that this solution is going to be the right one for us 2 years down the road. But I can guarantee you that if we get started on this journey and start to learn these capabilities as lawyers using AI, we're going to be a better place a few years from now than if we don't. I think it's also important for managers to try and role model some of that change. I spoke to a general counsel who said, I'm investing time in taking courses in AI because I want to show my team that I can learn. And I might not be the newest kid on the block, but I'm learning. And if I can, they can too. So it's letting go a little bit from legal managers being used to having all the answers
Hmm.
and being able to explain everything in 100% detail to their people, to moving to a place where it's a little less telling and a little more asking and a little less certainty and a little more vulnerability, where you say, we're on this journey together. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen, but I'm here and let's figure it out together.
Yeah, fantastically put. And you raise a couple of great points. One, I love that example of the GC actually taking classes on AI and learning how to use it themselves instead of just pointing at the employees and saying, you go figure this out or else you're in trouble. But you raise another interesting point, which is that ROI may not be immediate. People are still trying to figure out use cases. You still have, in many cases, solutions looking for a problem, which is pretty common in the B2B SaaS world and now the AI world. So what are your recommendations in terms of engendering the right mindset, both at the leadership level and at the team level, for the time frame and how much experimentation and how much trial and error might be involved for people to figure out where the actual value is and what the use cases are? Because it's almost like R&D mode. You're still trying to figure out what the tools are. So you can't just go into production mode where you're automatically plugging it into your workflows if you haven't identified the use case yet. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important question. A lot of firms, of course, and legal departments, they run pilots. So pilots are very important because it sends the signal that this is an experiment and encourages people to provide feedback. So that's very important. But what we're also seeing is that even when you get past the pilot stage, that solution might not be the perfect one for you because you're learning all the time. It's a very complex thing. It's not like iManage, where it's just storing documents in one place versus the other. It's highly complex. It actually takes a lot of work to use an AI tool successfully. And the vendor side is still evolving. We don't know who the winners are going to be 2 to 3 years from now. So what I've seen is in some cases you'll have a department or a firm that says, okay, we finished the pilot, we've got this tool, but almost immediately people are saying, "Oh, I'm not too happy with it. I don't think it fits my needs." And then they start spending their energy after buying licenses. They spend their energy sitting in demos to try and buy another tool that they hope is better. But first, any other tool is not going to be that much better. Not yet. It will take some time. And second, you're not spending your energy really building the capabilities. So building capabilities is a very good angle to look at it now. Instead of obsessing over what's the right tool or which is the perfect tool, I would say just choose one that's you think is at least 70 to 80% meeting your needs for your use case. So fit for purpose is very important. And then just really focus on building capabilities. And by that, I mean learn prompting, learn how to prompt effectively, get your document management system cleaned up. So even if you have to move to another vendor, you can plug and play. It's also about understanding the risks and the limitations of AI in general, and not just the particular tool you're working with. So when I train legal departments and legal teams now, I try not to work from the tech backwards. That means a lot of vendors say, okay, if you use my assistant function, this is what you can do. And if you use my documentation function, this is what you can do. But I've started trying to flip it on its head and we'll say, let's start from your practice area and let's start from your actual use case. So let's start from I want to develop a due diligence checklist. And then how do you do it in different ways using the tool you have, depending on what you're trying to achieve? If you already have a sample checklist and you just want AI to clean it up, what does that look like? If you need a very detailed checklist that you can collaborate with other people on, then which tool actually helps? And by flipping it on its head, you do a few things. You actually get the lawyers more interested because they can see how it helps them. And second, you're building a capability that goes beyond a particular UX and a particular tool.
Yeah, fantastic point. And it really builds on that idea of you need to know what your actual use cases are. Don't just go finding a tool and then hoping to find a use for it after you've bought it. And then, like you said, maybe jump to another one before you even figured out the first one. So Lots of great advice. Can we go ahead and jump a little deeper into case study with what you're experiencing with your clients so far? And of course, you don't have to name anybody. Could you tell us about how you've gotten from that initial exploration phase to successful implementation and starting to measure ROI?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm working with a few law firms on their implementation of AI. And so it really is just project management. So the premise is when you have a new tool that really takes a lot of work to adopt, then you need feedback loops, you need communication, you need dedicated training that is sensitive to the feedback that you're getting. So what we really do is we start with I really like to start thinking from the why, the who, the what before you even go to the how. The problem is I think a lot of people go straight to the how. They get a tool and then they go, okay, go implement it, go forth and start using it. But when people don't understand why and they don't understand the roles and responsibilities of everyone involved, it's very hard for the project to go as planned. So I usually start from the why. The why is an executive question. It's at the leadership level. What is your North Star? What are you trying to achieve? And where do you want to direct your energy most towards? So, and when you see the big picture, I want to create efficiencies, but I also want to retool my lawyer's skill sets. Okay. Then there's also an element of HR, right? And the client might bring that in. Like, how do I retool my performance evaluation? So it becomes a much broader conversation. So once you have the North Star, then you're actually designing specific metrics. So the why becomes more specific into, okay, I'm actually trying to get my junior associates to stop doing this kind of work. Or I'm trying to engender rich usage of the solution. So I want to track the usage of different functionalities. Or you might say my target is around time saved. So then we set up the feedback loops that are necessary for that. We either get the dashboard from the vendor or we'll get the users survey for the qualitative feedback, like what is your perception of the usefulness of this tool, or we'll get both and we'll match that up and we really bring it together and we report to management that this is what we're achieving and we will track that over time. So that's the why, right? And then you get to the what. What is actually the use case that we're going to put in here? And what is the way that the tool helps in that? Which tasks are better reserved for humans so you don't skip your critical thinking, and that's usually designing a good prompt, putting context into the prompt. But then what are the parts of the work that you want to automate to AI because it's actually good at it? So the what really starts to involve the mid-level associates. It starts to involve the lawyers actually working on deals, and then you go to your champions because you've appointed AI champions. Go to the champions and you say, hey, can you help me design a specific workflow that addresses 30% of what your team does? And then once you've got a workflow, people can actually test it. They can actually try to brainstorm how to reduce hallucinations. Then you've got something here. You've got something here that people can actually feel tangibly improves their work and their outcomes and makes their life a bit easier. So that's the what, right? You're actually starting to talk specifics about use cases, workflows, what prompting actually looks like, and how different users, whether it's litigation or corporate, can use the tool effectively to solve their problems. And then the how is your more day-to-day stuff. It's like, how do I just send out tips and how do I keep the firm updated on what are the latest features and functionalities? And there can be 3 or 4 new functionalities a month for a tool that you've adopted. So to expect an individual lawyer to have the time to keep track and then to learn adoption is quite a tall order. So you really need someone to keep track, to curate what's useful in those updates, and then to understand from the vendor how to use it, whether it serves our purposes, and then to train users. So it's highly labor intensive work, and either you have someone internally, an in-house innovation team and knowledge management team that can really help you with this work, or you bring in outsiders and consultants. Otherwise, you're just going to have a failed investment. And even worse, you might disillusion your people, you might create a disconnection with them. So we're just trying to make the best outcomes. And that's how I try to think about it, stepping through the different phases, getting from the why down to the how.
Yeah. And it sounds simple enough. For so many people right now, the why is they're hearing people at conferences or on LinkedIn saying, AI is not going to take your job. A lawyer using AI is going to take your job. So everyone's rushing to grab some AI and figure out what to do with it, right? But to your point, and this is something where, like I said, I've been on the vendor side, and we can talk about our AI all day, but really what people care about is the jobs they have to do. And so that's what, when you're adopting it, that's what you need to be thinking about. What is the job you actually have to do? And then what's going to help you do it? So yeah, fantastic point. And then I love what you're saying about once you figured out the why, and only after that, you're going into the what, and you're bringing in the people who are actually doing the what every day, which is how you'll then get to the how instead of prematurely jumping to that first. So yeah, I love that framework.
I love what you said about the why sometimes being the wrong why. And FOMO is a big one driving it. I also see a lot of people very, very fixated on just cost savings.
Mm,
And the challenge with that is the cost savings will happen, but it will take time. But the other side of it is to think more abundantly about maybe instead of saving 30% of costs, maybe I can expand 30% of revenue, or maybe I can achieve better quality outcomes. And I would love more of a discussion on quality. So, one of the feedbacks that we got in a user survey, which I thought was really insightful, was they said it's actually hard to discuss time saved because sometimes I find AI helps me do something I wouldn't have been able to do myself,
mm-hmm.
like trawling through 200 documents and finding some obscure factual reference that I can use in my litigation. Or it helps me to sanity check and make sure that my letter of demand is comprehensive, whereas I wouldn't have been able to do it. In the past, it would just be me talking to my neighbor and saying, do you think I've covered everything based on what we've worked on before? But AI gives me access to a treasure trove that I would not have had before. So I love that point because it drives home the message that AI can be much more than efficiency play. It can be a quality play and it can solve clients' problems and not just your internal top line, bottom line problems.
Yeah, and that's absolutely a fantastic point where, again, from the vendor side, you see a lot of vendors just talk about speed. They talk about speed, they talk about efficiency gains, and to some extent, I think it ties back to what we were talking about with the culture disconnect. When you're not really plugged in with the culture of the people whose problems you're trying to solve with your software or with your AI solution, are you building the right things and are you even communicating about them the right way? And to your point, yeah, I think a lot of people are focusing on, oh, it's so much faster to do this task now that I have AI to do it. And that's great. But the transformation isn't just the cost savings. It isn't just the time savings. Whether you're in a law firm or in-house, as you were saying, think of all those projects that everyone's always talking about where you're saying, oh, in an ideal world, we'd have this perfect clause library, or we'd have a perfect playbook, or we'd have a bank of every template crafted optimally with fallbacks for every scenario we can think of. And of course, nobody ever has the time to do that because once you get through all the billable work you have to do if you're in a firm, or just this massive backlog of matters when you're in house, everyone wants to go home, right? So yeah, once you take away that massive lift in terms of worker hours that it takes to do the things you're doing today, then you can look at, well, we're not just saving time and cutting costs on the work we're doing today. We can now do things that we were never able to do before. So yeah, let's take a look at those and frame return on investment in those terms.
Yes. And that changes the conversation in several helpful ways, right? First, if you focus on time saved, people actually get a little frustrated sometimes because they say, actually, the time that I saved, I'm spending time checking citations. And I'm spending
Yeah.
time checking AI slop and making sure that it's and paying special attention to make sure that there wasn't any hallucination. So then they get, hey, why am I doing this if it's not actually saving time, which is what you told me it would do?
Yeah.
But if you expand that conversation a bit and say the why is bigger than time saved, the why is helping you do things that you wouldn't have been able to do before. Good example is contract lifecycle management for in-house legal teams. There's one problem that has never been solved, which is how do we actually effectively manage contracts that have already been signed, their expiry dates, the need to renew. Usually, right now, it's sales teams have Salesforce and it's all tracked in different places, and it's really down to the individual salesperson to be quite judicious about tracking their timelines. But CLM can actually track tens of thousands of contracts and give you proactive prompts as to like, okay, this month you've got 100 agreements expiring, and these are the terms for them, and these are some clauses that you might want to look into. And that's something that wouldn't have been possible without AI. So I think starting to change the conversation a little from the very bare bones to a broader vision will help. And I heard this very insightful quote from a vendor I was speaking to that day. This vendor has been in the market for 8 years. So before all the hype, he's been working through and solving customer problems. And he said a very sensible thing, which is people are underestimating the work to adopt AI in the short term and overestimating its capabilities in the short term. But they are also underestimating the capabilities of AI in the long term. And I think what he means by that is that people are taking a very short term view. They want results now, and they don't want to put in a lot of work to get those results. But the results they're looking at are also quite table stakes. It's like cutting time. But those that are going to be successful 3 to 4 years from now are the legal teams and the legal departments and the law firms that take a longer term view and say there's actually a lot here that can be achieved for the client 3 to 4 years from now. We can reinvent billing structures. We can actually genuinely move away from just the billable hour. It will still be a part of our lives, but how do we go hybrid? How do we change the experience for the specific associate or partner so that then they are not individually obsessed on their hours, where they can be evaluated on quality of client outcomes or the strength of client trust. Teams that are successful are going to be the ones that have that longer term vision and are able to coach their teams and say, hey, we've got this longer term vision. I know it seems far away, but let's take it step by step. Let's build your capabilities in layers, and let's get you the training and the support you need.
Yeah. Fantastic point about setting expectations. I think everyone feels the urgency to start today, but to your point, people also seem to think that they're supposed to get the results today. And that's just not how real change, real transformation works, especially when nobody really knows how all of this is going to end up 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Absolutely get started today, but recall that this is a journey. We're not all going to reach the destination within the next quarter or even within the next year. But yeah, as you're figuring out the use cases and the workflows around AI and which tools are really, really best for that, you start to see that return on investment beyond just time saved today and cost savings. There's another point there, which is, I like how you framed it. People overestimate what the AI can do today, but they underestimate what it can do in the long term. And so I think a lot of people are looking for sort of an easy button. And I think that's partly because the interface right now, you have all these chatbots that sound very fluent. They sound very human, right? And so that engenders the mindset when you're interacting with it that, yeah, this is like a magic assistant. It sounds like a competent colleague, therefore it should be as functional as a competent colleague. But it should be even faster because it generates a response in seconds. And then when they see, oh wait, it answered me really quickly, but it just made stuff up, or it forgot what we were talking about 5 minutes ago. This is garbage. And then they walk away from it.
Yeah. They give up.
Exactly. So yeah, I think we have to kind of check our own, I think it's our own tendency to anthropomorphize the technology. And it's not really our fault. It's because of how it's been presented to us. It's this confident, articulate assistant that wants to help us with everything and never acknowledges, oh, I don't have enough information to answer that. So yeah, it's a great point that you raised. That just temper your expectations for what the AI can do today and how quickly you'll see the ROI. At the same time, recognize that the fact that you have to do more work with it today to figure it out how to use it and how to get value out of it does not negate the value you can get tomorrow, next year, 2 years from now. But start the journey. Don't give up on the journey just because you're hitting a few speed bumps early on.
Yeah. And when we think about the transition to when the internet came around, the smart companies weren't jumping all in on the internet, but what they were doing was building their capabilities. They would keep their physical storefronts, but they would set up an online store, start to experiment, start to learn. Like, how does online shopping work? Like, what's different about it? what does success look like? And then you learn, and then over time, you move more of your inventory from physical stores to online. But then you
Hmm.
also realize that online unlocks capabilities that weren't available to you before. You say, I can enter a new market without opening a physical store. Hey, it can do more for me. It's much bigger than this. I can use the internet to amplify my brand to 100 different countries. So the smart companies were those that saw the long-term potential, but also just didn't go all in from day one. They experimented, they learned from others, their competitors. They learned by themselves through experimentation. They learned from the vendor ecosystem, right? That's how we got the winners for today of the .com, which is your Amazons of the world, your Shopify's of the world. What makes them so great is that they've managed to solve problems consistently over a long period of time, but it takes time. Right? So the problem right now is we have not seen a legal tech vendor for AI, it's focused on AI, solve problems consistently. But we've seen that for legal tech with DocuSign. We've seen it for practice management tools like Clio. But it takes time, it takes building of trust, and it takes reasonable expectations from both sides.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that the e-commerce analogy. Not too long after e-commerce started, you have the dot-com bust. And if everybody had just given up on it then, what would the world look like? But there was potential. There was value in it. People just had to figure out over time what that would look like. So the people who they piloted, they didn't go all in, but they figured out, okay, here's a use case. Here's how we're going to approach it. We're going to approach it with one market, one product. And then once they figured out what worked, they could scale and iterate across different products, different markets, different lines of business, and go from there. So yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it. And it's something I certainly, because I spend a lot of time writing about legal tech and how to use it. And it's something I certainly write about a lot, which is don't try to boil the ocean figuring out use cases for AI or legal tech in general. Look at one thing you know is a problem today. Maybe it's a bottleneck. Maybe it's a communication gap. Figure out that one thing and identify a tool that solves that one thing. Pilot it. Once you know it works, then yeah, roll it out to more teams, more offices. Try it with other document types, other workflows. But start small. Start with something you can control and measure and then go from there. Yeah, great way to think about it. So let's move into a segment that I am calling Keeping It Human, because in my mind, the point of all this AI stuff is that we can focus on things that make us human, the creativity, the strategy, and on top of that, going home and, say, spending time with our families, having creative pursuits. So there's nothing more human than being a parent. You and I both have children. We actually talked about this previously. When we're talking about AI with our children and teaching them how to use it or keeping them away from it entirely, it presents its own unique set of challenges. So how are you approaching AI with your children? How are you talking about it with them? How are you showing them how to use it? Or are you just saying, no, don't touch it? That's for later.
Well, this is always an interesting one, and none of us have the answers as parents. But my view is, as someone who's worked in tech for 2 decades, AI is only going to get easier to use. Consumer tech is designed to be easy to use, so I'm not worried about my children picking it up later when they need to. So for now, I'm not really focused on asking them to use AI much. Sometimes we use it to brainstorm for my daughter's public speaking competition, but I'll kind of force her to edit it herself. But recently we were on a beach holiday, and we were supposed to go diving, but it rained for days. It rained for 5 days. So my kids used GarageBand to create their own R&B song. They wrote the lyrics, they chose the beats, and then they layered on their own singing. It was hilarious. And if I taught them to use AI, they would have just used the prompts to generate that. And what would be the fun in that? So I love the part of children learning creativity, and when the day comes that they have to use AI in their work, they'll be able to marry their own creativity and sense of fun and why it's great to create on your own and think on your own. They'll be able to marry that with AI, and then they'll be much more equipped for the future. That's my approach, but we've all got our own, and we have to see how it goes.
Yeah, I love that because, there have been the studies already showing that people who go to AI first and let it do everything for them, a lot of them are actually regressing or just failing at the student level, failing to develop those critical thinking skills and those creative skills in the first place. So, I always say AI is all about augmenting human capability, not replacing it. So yeah, I love that. You're teaching them the joy of creating and helping them develop that muscle, developing that skill where they're thinking through, okay, this is what I want to make. This is how I want to make it. And then, later, like you said, AI is really easy to use. If anything, it's too easy to use in some cases. So yeah, let them experience that joy and do the hard work of learning how to create something a little more manually. And then later on, once they incorporate AI into their own workflows, whatever that looks like, they'll be that much better equipped to do whatever it is they want to do. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Ceschino. This has been a really great session and given me a good opportunity to think through AI and the human side of us.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you, Lynette. And so thank you to everyone else who has listened in as well. If you are just starting out your legal tech journey, you can learn more about all things legal tech on thelegaltechguide.com. If you're a little further along on your legal tech journey and you're trying to figure out your why and your what before you get into the how, we happen to have an expert right here who can help you do that. So go ahead and get in touch with Lynette Ooi on LinkedIn. She'll be happy to walk you through it, talk with you about your team's needs, and help you figure out how to approach legal tech with intention. So Lynette, thank you again for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Ceschino.
That's it for this episode of The Future of Law is Today. Subscribe for more straight talk on law and legal tech. And share it with someone who still thinks Master of Laws when you say LLM. Thanks for listening.